This morning, Texas Congressman Colin Allred on the offense in what polls show is a close race against Senator Ted Cruz. But is enthusiasm around Vice President Harris helping or hurting his Texas campaign? One of the questions we will ask him. Why is Harris, though, spending so much time in Texas? This isn't a battleground state. Is there anything we should read into it? In Austin and San Marcos, a legal win in the effort to decriminalize marijuana. But how can a Texas city legalize something the state has already outlawed? The group behind it is on the program this morning. And Texas lawmakers demanding change at Houston's CenterPoint Energy. State Senator Paul Bettencourt on the new requirements that are likely to come out of the utility's massive failures.
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good Sunday morning. I'm Jason Whiteley. Let's start the program here with some of the top political headlines that we are watching across the state. Facebook and Instagram, owned by Meta there, have allegedly been breaking Texas law and have now agreed to pay back the state big time. Texas accused the company that owns them of running facial recognition software every single time we uploaded photos, but never telling us about it. Now, the result is the company could identify us in photos, and that violates a 2011 Texas law. The company agreed to pay Texas $1.4 billion, the largest single settlement any state has ever won. You know, those border buoys in the Rio Grande that Texas put in there near Eagle Pass don't have to come out of the river after all, for now at least. A three-judge panel on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals told Texas to remove them. A larger panel of judges on that New Orleans conservative court, though, overruled their colleagues and said the buoys can stay. The federal lawsuit over them all, though, goes to trial soon. And political problems in Texas might finally be catching up with the state's reputation. Texas ranked as the third worst state to move to this year. Yes, people are still moving here by the droves, but Consumer Affairs says what Texans already know. The Texas ranks low with health insurance, with public education, and affordability. California did rank as the worst state to move to. Utah came out as the best. Let's start this morning, though, with the biggest race in Texas this November, Colin Allred versus Ted Cruz. Allred starting a new campaign blitz right now, but why hasn't he been seen with the Vice President, Kamala Harris, on her 3 recent trips to Texas? We begin our questions with Allred himself, who still represents parts of Dallas County in Congress. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Polls have been up and down in your race. A month ago, it showed Cruz with a substantial lead. The most recent poll from the University of Houston had you guys virtually tied. What are internal polls showing you right now?
Well, I think it's always been a close race, and I think it's going to finish as a close race. What I want Texans to know is who I am, that I was born and raised here in Dallas. By a single mom. Went to public schools here. That was a big deal for us when I got a scholarship to Baylor, that I've played in the NFL, and that I've served in Congress in a way that shows you can bring folks together. And I think that's the exact opposite of how Ted Cruz has served us. And that, to me, as folks get to know that story, I think is one that we'll continue to see the polls tighten.
Well, let's talk about the big news in this race. Since you and I last spoke, Vice President Harris got in the race, President Biden got out of the race. She's generated massive momentum. How does that affect you and your campaign?
Yeah. Well, you know, I want to say that I do think that what President Biden did was historic in terms of, putting your country first. I think it was the right thing to do. And this was a close race before he got out of the race, and it's still a close race now.
Does she impact your campaign at all? Does she bring energy? Does she bring enthusiasm from voters to show up and help yours?
I think we've seen a lot of energy and enthusiasm, and I think that's great. But we also had that in many cases before. And so I think this is a continuation of that. I think a lot of Texans are fired up about moving on from Ted Cruz. They know we can't afford 6 more years of him. So I think enthusiasm is important, but now we also have to turn it into action and getting folks out to vote, which has been one of our biggest struggles here in Texas.
Let me ask the flip side of that. You were outperforming President Biden in the polls consistently. Does Vice President Harris drag on your campaign at all here?
I think this is a choice for Texans about who's going to be our next senator, and I think it always has been. That's why I think you saw the big discrepancy when President Biden was at the top of the ticket, and I think you'll see that also with Senator Harris, because this is a really important choice for us, as I said.
Last weekend you were in Houston and you launched the something called Texas Offense, or Get Out the Vote effort. Well, we saw 6 years ago Beto O'Rourke have a similar effort, just as large. How is yours different from his, though?
This is fundamentally different. And, as you know, I was a linebacker. I played defense my whole career. Well, now we're going on offense. And that means coordinating for the first time in over 20 years, a real statewide coordinated campaign here in Texas. And so we're going to try and make sure that we're sharing data, sharing resources, and really being much more efficient with what we're doing. So it's
and sharing
fundamentally
it with who? With the party, with other candidates, with who?
Yeah, up and down the ballot. And I think that's really important in terms of efficiency. But this is about us, talking to Texans, Texans talking to Texans, neighbors talking to neighbors, making sure that we get the vote out, but also that we have these really hard and important conversations about what direction we want to go in. And this is going to help with that. And to me, that's a good thing.
I want to ask you about some news of the day happening here too. President Biden's proposed these significant changes to the U.S. Supreme Court, term limits for justices, ethics disclosures, just like other federal judges have. Is that something you support?
Yeah, I have always supported the ethics changes, and I think that's really important.
How about term limits?
Yeah, I think I want to look at it more and understand the way that would operate. I do think that the original intention of the Supreme Court probably wasn't for folks to serve on there for 40 years, right? That wasn't the expectation. And so I think we've gotten away from probably the original intention there. And I think we're seeing that we do need to constantly have discussions about how we can improve our democracy. And if that will help, then it's something I'll support. But I want to look at it and consider it more. But I do think that when it comes to particularly ethics, that this is something that should have happened a long time ago. And that the Supreme Court has in a lot of ways brought this on themselves with some of their activities and really questioning the legitimacy of some of what they're doing.
We're a little more than 90 days away right now
Yeah.
from the November election. Do you think that Texans are going to see you and Senator Cruz in a debate face to face?
I certainly hope so, and I'm ready to debate. Obviously, it'll be up to Senator Cruz what he wants to do, but I think it's an important thing for Texans to see, and I look forward to having that.
How many times will you debate him? Have you challenged him? Have you spoken to his team about that?
We're having discussions right now. Yeah.
Congressman, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I appreciate it. Yeah.
All right, let's bring in the roundtable to talk about the politics of this. Bud Kennedy is here from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Matthew Watkins in Austin for us from the Texas Tribune. Bernadine Steptoe, political producer at WFAA in Dallas. Bud, no matter how many times I asked, in different ways I asked, he did not want to directly address whether Kamala Harris is helping or hurting his campaign.
He didn't want to talk about her before the change in presidential candidate. Now he still doesn't want to talk about her very much. I think it's easy to say that she does help him by making visits to Houston that might motivate voters, but he really is intensely trying to keep himself separated from the top of the ticket. He knows the top of the ticket won't carry Texas.
And that's a good point, Matthew. What's your takeaway from that, what you just heard?
Yeah, those visits that Bud mentioned, they have not been the kind of gathering of all the politicians in Texas, people trying to kind of glom on to the energy that she's bringing to get out voters in this particular state. That tells me a little bit of something. And yeah, hearing that interview, I was really struck by how much he didn't want to talk about Kamala Harris. I think gives you a hint of kind of what his mindset is there.
I cannot imagine, Bernadine, Republicans, though, on the other side. They line up behind their candidate, Donald Trump, over the last decade or so. I can't imagine the same thing happening on the other side.
I think eventually, but one thing that he should hope for is that she does bring out some Democrats. But also remember, the Republicans are labeling her as the border czar. And they're using that as a negative. So he just wants to run on his own merits. But this momentum that she's generating, I'm sure he hopes that it does radiate down to him.
And that enthusiasm, either way, is going to help. The Harris enthusiasm is going to help Allred down ballot.
Jason, what he really needs, he needs a couple of visits by Hillary Clinton down in the valley. He didn't carry any county south of Bexar County in the primary in running. He needs those South Texas votes. Ted Cruz is running Spanish language ads.
All right, guys, thanks so much. Back in just a moment with that. Here's what else is coming up. When we come back this morning, Texas utilities likely to face new requirements now after the failures from Houston's CenterPoint Energy. State Senator Paul Bettencourt lays out some of the proposals. And the effort to decriminalize marijuana is winning in Texas, but for how long? Inside Texas Politics, back in a moment. Welcome back to Inside Texas Politics. State lawmakers gave a lashing to the CEO of CenterPoint Energy last week. The head of the Houston utility appeared in Austin for a Senate committee hearing. Senators wanted to know why 2 million people lost power in Houston after that small hurricane last month. Why didn't CenterPoint better prepare? Our next guest, State Senator Paul Bettencourt, a Republican from Houston, who has some ideas on how to fix the utility's failures. Senator, good to see you again. I want to ask you about those 20 large generators. Let's start right there that CenterPoint Energy had. Customers, including you, paid for those over the last few years. CenterPoint didn't even roll them out and use them during Hurricane Beryl. And you heard the CEO say why he did not. But you discussed the possibility of legislation to maybe get some of that money back that CenterPoint customers paid for that. What would that look like if it were to happen?
Well, first off, that's about $800 million of a capital purchase. And what people need to understand is that public utilities in the state, they get a profit margin on top of that. So there was a big discussion in the hearing about how much that is. It was at least $30 million, et cetera. So not only did we buy 15 boat anchors that are big, giant 32 megawatt generators, they also made a profit margin on it. And you're absolutely right. They haven't turned them on once since they bought them because they're too big. And part of the problem is if you buy too big, it takes 5 days to move them and set them up. So it's a really wasted purchase. But even worse than that, they leased them, so the cost was probably more like 1.2 billion. And even worse than that, they didn't go with the low bidder. CenterPoint, what I would hope, would willingly discuss the need to return that money back to the ratepayers. That's what I hope happens, because all you can do is point out stupidity and triplicate like this was and say, hey, we should have never have done this. We can't use these things. They're boat anchors around the ratepayers. And so cough up some of the money. If I was an inspector general, that contract is so weird and so suspicious with such a small company. It had all sorts of terms in it that favored an operating lease versus a straight buy. I mean, I would be investigating it for fraud.
You live in and obviously represent the Houston area. Do you trust CenterPoint?
At this point, they've got a lot to make up. I'll quote Senator Colcourse from the hearing. She's from Brennan. The trust with the consumers is broken.
Let's zoom out for a moment here. We're still in hurricane season. We saw the committee hearing that happened a few days ago. What do you expect concrete, legislatively, to come out of that committee hearing?
Well, what I expect concrete is coming out of that hearing is we're going to have a serious discussion about clawing back this $800 million, especially after the letter the Lieutenant Governor is going to release to the PUC. We're going to look at how the PUC made the decision to approve those generators in the first place and look and make sure that there is enough, safeguards there to keep a major decision like that happening again, because they overrode a administrative law judge who said, don't do this. And they went ahead and overrode them. Then we're going to look at top-down guidelines and legislation about mandating these composite poles, looking at, vegetation removal, et cetera, what we can do to follow that Florida model that worked. But in the meantime, I'm expecting, Reliant to get with it. CenterPoint to get with it. By the way, Reliant was fine. We had plenty of energy.
Right.
We just couldn't get it to the folks. Okay?
On the power lines, yeah.
Yeah, on the power lines. But they're supposed to release a tracker today, which was another just blow your head off stupidity, that they had the ability for people to look up and say, hey, is my power coming on or not? And they turned it off after our first storm. And, that was, subject to one of my Aggieisms, which is double blank. I won't say what it is, but it's stupid. Okay. So they've got a lot of stupidity to come out of the grave on here before they get the public's trust back.
Senator, we'll be watching as well, too. Thanks so much for the insight. Always good to talk to you.
Thank you.
Texans trying to decriminalize marijuana scored another legal victory last week. Austin and San Marcos voted to decriminalize small amounts of weed. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton sued, saying you can't do that because marijuana is against state law. But a judge in Hays County dismissed Paxton's lawsuit. Same thing happened in Austin in June. Katina Vollinger runs Ground Game Texas, which is the progressive group behind this effort. Katina, welcome to the program here. Congratulations on that early legal win in Hays County there outside of Austin. But lay out the legal argument for us here. If the state says marijuana is illegal or anything's illegal, how can a city say we want to make it legal?
Yes, thank you for having me, Jason. So what we are doing is legal. These two court cases that came out of Hayes and Travis County, both judges have said there's no merit to this. So we want to be clear, what we are doing is legal and actually has been in practice for some Texas cities for years. This is very simple. The state of Texas does not give Dallas money for Dallas police, right? They cannot regulate discretion and how the city prioritizes enforcements on this, right? And I think what our policy is just saying is that the Dallas community and Texas in general are tired of investing in these draconian laws that are ineffective, wasteful, and often racially biased.
Why is it so important to gather these signatures, to put it on the ballot, to codify the language? At the end of the day, district attorneys in all 254 counties, they get discretion to decide what they want to prosecute and not want to prosecute. Why not just work directly with them and say, listen, if we don't have enough police officers on the street in certain counties or enough, bed space in jails, let's forego these little, 2 ounces or 4 ounces arrests that we have.
That's a good point. I think a lot of people don't understand literally in how county and city work together or in terms of the criminal legal system. I think it's so intricate and nuanced. If there are no city police collecting evidence or citing or ticketing or jailing for this, it will never meet the arm of the county and the district attorneys and the county attorneys, correct? So what you're doing is you're being proactive and the stance of saying we don't need to collect and burden our jail system. We don't need to burden our our legal system. We don't need to burden our DAs with all of this.
Katina, thank you for the time. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jason.
The Roundtable is ready when we return here on Inside Texas Politics. And our podcast this week is with Nikki Haley voters who now support Kamala Harris. They are not backing away from their name either, and they are laying out a strategy for November in swing states. This episode of Y'all-itics ready to download this morning, wherever you get your podcasts. Time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. Bud, Matthew, and Bernadine all back with us to talk about this. Let's start with Vice President Harris. Bud, she has been in Texas 3 times recently, twice as the Democratic nominee for president. Is it the barbecue? Why is she here and not in the swing states where she needs to be right now?
She is, and you've seen other Democrats come here just to build enthusiasm and to show spirit. But, the big reason she's here is to raise money. She comes to Houston to raise money, to bring in the cash. Texas, when it comes to presidential races, Texas is a giant ATM. That's the role we play for the Democratic Party nationwide.
And I was read one of her press releases, Matthew, and I think she said $310 million over the past month and a half is what the campaign brought in. Tremendous numbers since she became the nominee.
Right. I mean, it just again points to the excitement that people had, maybe around her, maybe also about getting Biden off the ballot, given the concerns that were there. Will that excitement translate, or what will it translate to in Texas? We'll see. I don't know.
But you all remember, she was here to address the sorority, which is comprised of her base, women. Why wouldn't she be here?
Women from all over the country.
She was here, yes, and she was here also for a funeral.
Sheila Jackson Lee.
Yes, so she was here for particular reasons, and as well using Texas as an ATM. But she could not have missed the reason she was here. She couldn't have missed the group of sorority women.
Both events with a national profile. Bernadine's right.
Yes.
And they did have a lot of attention on both of those. Let's talk about Donald Trump's campaign for a moment here. It doesn't seem to have found its footing, Bud, in countering her. It hasn't found a message that sticks against her yet. She seems to be maintaining the momentum 2 weeks in a row.
Well, and Donald Trump is going to have to recalibrate. If she's bringing younger voters in, then he's going to have to recalibrate and have some sort of message to younger voters. What I hear is that they're not, people want to know how he's spending all this money that he has since his convention. He doesn't seem to be spending it on social media, TikTok, The only emails they send are emails to raise money. He doesn't seem to be doing it in ways that make connection with younger voters. And then, of course, he's out talking about, when Kamala Harris, quote unquote, became black or whatever, and sharing tweets about her birth certificate. It's like the birther all over again.
And the birther that he was talking about President Obama with a few years back. But Matthew, at the end of the day, it seems to me like the Trump campaign was caught off guard with this. They had the unity message at the end of the RNC. That went out the window pretty quickly. They're back to the regular playbook, and it doesn't seem to be working right now, at least, against Harris.
Right. It's interesting. They went after her, calling her the border czar. That didn't really seem to work, at least so far. They, an issue important to Texas, saying she wanted to ban fracking. She came out and said, she doesn't hold that position anymore. It does seem a lot of kind of throwing up, what you can against the wall, seeing what sticks. Still got some time to kind of pin her down, but this is part of the challenge of you had this whole strategy going after Biden, and that just completely went out the window. It's understandable that they're scrambling right now.
Do you think he'll debate Bernadine? Do you think we'll see them?
You know what? It's nothing normal about this race. But I want to also say that they don't know how to deal with people of color. They don't know how to campaign.
Who are you talking about, the Trump campaign?
Actually, Republican Party, period. But definitely the Trump campaign, because they're reverting to the race card. And quite frankly, the constituencies have moved forward. It's not catching on. And so I think that they need to bring in new people into this campaign and determine how to campaign against a person of color and a woman.
All right, guys, thanks so much. We appreciate that. Matthew, good to see you. Thank you for watching as well. We're back next Sunday to take you inside Texas politics, and we hope to see you then. Take care.